This is the S&D 50 College Football Show, Week 8. Spencer, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Drew?
Doing great. What are we drinking tonight?
You know, I'm actually mixing it up. First, I've got my Topo Chico lime with mint extract. I've also got the flavor Dr. Death from Liquid Death. I don't know if you guys have ever had this stuff.
See, now it's Liquid Death.
I gotta say, Liquid Death, it's a little undercarbonated for my taste, so we'll see.
Oh, I love Liquid Death.
It's also got like the hint of like agave or something, so it's like a tiny bit sweeter than I'm used to.
I put on a trail race every year here in my hometown, and at the finish line, I got cans of Liquid Death for the runners, and they love it.
Jacob, how are you?
I am so good, Andrew, and the reason why I'll let you listen right now. I got LaCroix with me. I was sick and tired of hearing Spencer always drinking his bubbly carbonated water. And tonight I decided I ain't missing out. So LaCroix is here, and I'm about to pour this in a cup of ice. Yep, got a glass right now, pouring it in, and I'm going to enjoy this through this podcast.
Cubed or crushed ice?
Do you have to ask? You've heard my stance on this already.
I'm here for the controversy.
In case you have not heard our previous episode, it is cubed all the way, never crushed, never crushed.
Spencer, this is week 8. If someone is tuning in for the first time to this show, what is this show all about?
This show is all about rating and ranking the resumes of every college football team. This show is a merit-based system that ranks each team based on how they perform on the field, based on who they play, and then based on how those opponents do in future weeks. So you get credit for beating teams that go beat teams. You lose credit if you beat a team who then goes and gets blown out by somebody else. The other thing our model is it is not predictive. Even though we'll talk about competitive games and ratings, we just look at similar resumes when we talk about that. This is not a predictive model. It is a resume ranker, merit-based, bias-free. You don't get extra points for being a blue-chip school. You don't get extra points for being in a conference. We don't even make conference-level adjustments. We just rate each team based on how they perform on the field every week.
And like you said, Spencer, it's all done through a model. The human bias is taken out.
Completely
This is
gone.
a model that does it, which is the beautiful thing.
Sometimes it shocks us.
Who made this model?
We did. We put this together. We cycled through past seasons to get it to a point where we felt like it would be good to bring to the table this year. And here we are 8 weeks in, and I'm not going to lie, I love it. I love the view this model gives me of the sport, of the teams. It really helps me see where teams should be ranked.
To give the layout of the show, what we do is we go through and we are going to reveal the top 50 teams and how they've performed up through week 7. Again, not a predictive model. We are rating and ranking teams based on how they've performed through the first 7 weeks of the season today. Before we reveal that 50, we will review last week's most competitive games. We will then talk about the teams who fell out of the S&D 50. We'll talk about honorable mentions, teams that did not make the S&D 50 that still deserve a shout out. We'll reveal the 50 and then preview week 8. As always, we want to thank every single one of you who subscribes, who likes our videos, who watches our videos, whether it's shorts, long form. Thank you so much. Please continue to subscribe and like. We cannot thank you enough. You are spreading the good word of the S&D 50 far and wide. Week 7, most competitive games. These were our 6 most competitive games that the model identified. We were looking for a competitive rating over 70. If you're new to the show, the competitive rating is something the model calculates. If a game is over 70, it's going to be an amazing game, whether it's offensively or defensively, close and competitive. So our first matchup was number 129 Liberty going to 127 UTEP. Liberty won 19-8. The competitive rating was 72.2. Number 6 Alabama went to number 8 Missouri and won 27-24. The competitive rating was an 88. Number 36 Nebraska went to number 42 Maryland and won 34-31. The competitive rating in that game was an 83.4. Our big whiff of the week, number 102 Rice went to number 101 UTSA. UTSA boat raced Rice. The final score was 61-13. The competitive rating was a negative 1.6. Number 77 Troy went to number 79 Texas State. This was the game of the week. Troy with an absolute comeback for the ages, wins 48-41 in overtime. The competitive rating was a 73.6. Number 69 Utah State went to number 72 Hawaii. Utah State lost to Hawaii. The competitive rating was an 87.4.
That Troy Texas State game, like you said,
baby.
Andrew.
Baby.
Texas State got out to a 28-7 lead in the first quarter. And it's kind of interesting looking at the box score, how Texas State is front loaded on the points. And then you see the points get lower and lower each quarter. And Troy was just a steady 10 here, 14 here, 10 here. It just goes to show the steady Eddie goes for the win, and they were able to get it done in overtime. Wow, what a game that was.
I was score watching this game, and when Texas State went up 28-7 in the first quarter, I was miserable. I'm like, no, we thought this was going to be competitive. And it was around the same time UTSA and Rice was going, and I was so upset. And then I tuned in later, and I was like, oh my gosh, Troy won. They came back and won. All the headlines, Troy comeback for the ages. What a pick by the model. And by the way, we did a game preview on this. It's just what a time to be creating models that can identify competitive games. Alabama and Missouri delivered. For all the people who said Missouri was fraudulent, I think we can now safely say they can compete with anybody.
As long as they're at home.
Correct. We haven't seen them on the road.
That to me is the big mystery of Missouri, is how will they perform when they have to go out of their comfort zone.
The construction behind one of the end zones is almost like, in baseball, the batter eye. I almost feel like it's an advantage for whoever's going the direction of the concrete wall. That there's you can see everything you need to see. It was awesome.
Now, that Utah State-Hawaii game, that had some fire to it. A lot of points scored, particularly in the first half. And the beautiful thing about that game is it started at midnight Eastern time. Now, I live in the Mountain Time zone. So what I was able to complete everything at home on Saturday, kiss my wife, say, hey, good night. You go to bed. I'm going to be up all night watching this game. It is no longer Pac-12 after dark when it comes to Hawaii. It's sickos after dark.
100%.
And I had a great time watching that thing, laying on my couch, eating some food, enjoying a competitive game.
Man, I tried to watch these games, like every single one. And, Alabama, Missouri was incredible. Nebraska, Maryland was great. Hawaii, Utah State, I got to halftime, but that's where I petered out. It was pretty late for me. a little earlier time than you.
I will say, I love that Hawaii is no longer playing in the Pro Bowl stadium, and they got their own little they got their own little stadium right there in Honolulu with the backdrop of the city. It's pretty sweet and a lot more scenic, in my opinion. Plus, the stands actually look full rather than sparse and empty.
I mean, their quarterback threw for 3 touchdowns, ran for another. They were great on Saturday/Sunday.
The model this week went 5 for 6 in identifying competitive games. It's our best week yet. Our season total, we were right around 70% in our games of the week being competitive. So again, stay tuned. At the end of our show today, we'll go through the week 8 games to watch. Here are the teams that fell out of the S&D 50. At number 81, down 41 spots, Fresno State loses to Colorado State, 49-21. At number 78, down 35 spots, Old Dominion loses to Marshall, 48-24. Number 61, down 24 spots, Louisiana Tech lost to Kennesaw State, 35-7. Number 55, Maryland is down 13 spots. They lost to Nebraska, as mentioned earlier, 34-31. At number 54, down 10 spots, the team that was absolutely destroyed by the Zebras, not the Georgia Bulldogs, the Auburn Tigers. They lose to Georgia, 20-10. And at number 51, down 10 spots, losing in a heartbreaker, Arizona loses to BYU in double overtime, 33-27.
Is there a team that's had it worse that got the shaft harder than Auburn did on Saturday?
No, there is not. And you had the Oklahoma game too.
I know. And then you even had South Carolina out there who also lost 20-10. There were some rough games for SEC losers this week.
Poor Hugh Freeze. He's just trying to be calm, and they choose to interview him at halftime as he's walking into the tunnel, and I can't.
Bad
His
choice.
composure at the end of halftime should be studied and applauded. It was incredible, the composure he had. He didn't do anything that he'd regret.
We've been high on Old Dominion this year. Said they were the clear favorites for the Sun Belt, and they got shellacked on Saturday by Marshall. And what did not help them in this game was committing 5 turnovers.
Yeah, that does not help.
Speaking of getting shellacked, Louisiana Tech, another darling of the model, who we had rising through the ranks of CUSA, came crashing back down to earth, losing 35-7 to Kennesaw State. We'll talk more about that in just a second, but Louisiana Tech out of the model. You'll notice, too, if you're looking at this graphic, when you lose, especially when you lose to people who are rated so far below you, it's not a gentle decline. You know, we're not the AP poll where Texas loses in week 1 and they slide just a little bit, and then they lose again and they slide just a little bit more, right? We in this poll, in this model, if you lose to competition that you should beat, you're really going to slide. If you lose to really good teams rated above you, you may not slide at all. We'll talk about that again. We'll talk about a team that exemplifies that in a second here too, but Old Dominion down 35 spots, Louisiana Tech down 24. No one had it worse than Fresno State, losing to really underperforming so far this year Colorado State and sliding 41 spots as a result.
Underperforming no more.
Underperforming up through this past week.
Yeah, Colorado State's finally looking like the team everyone thought they would be this year with how they played Fresno. And last word on Louisiana Tech, Spencer, they lost their starting quarterback, Blake Baker, in the second quarter, and that's when things really started to unravel. And the previous game, they lost the preseason Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year, Colby Fields, and it is unknown when he will return. And so injuries starting to mount up for the Bulldogs and take its effect.
G5, we will talk about this more because there are more teams in the S&D 50 that fell with losses. The G5 is nasty, nasty, nasty when it comes to trying to get out to get that playoff spot because every week you have to bring it.
Mm-hmm.
It almost feels BCS-like, where you have to run the table with no blemishes to even get a shot at the end. These are our honorable mentions for Week 8, teams that did not make the Week 8 S&D 50 that we still want to talk about. Number 79, Miami of Ohio, up 4 spots, beat Akron 20-7. Number 68, Washington State, up 14 spots, lost to Ole Miss 24-21. At number 58, Kennesaw State, as aforementioned, up 20 spots for beating Louisiana Tech 35-7. At number 57, up 9 spots, Wake Forest beat Oregon State 39-14. And at number 53, up 10 spots, San Diego State beat Nevada 44-10.
We'll have a MAC minute right now. Miami of Ohio started the year 0-3 with 3 losses to 2 to Power 4 teams, Big Ten teams, Wisconsin Rutgers, and then lost just a heartbreaker at home against as yet still undefeated UNLV. They have turned it around. They won their FCS game really handily, and then they've now played 2 conference games and have just really not been challenged in the MAC so far. Miami currently at number 79, our highest rated MAC team. Maybe probably says a bit about the MAC and how they've done in their non-conference play. They are rated just 1 spot ahead of Western Michigan, who they play not this week but next. Should go into that game against Western Michigan as the top 2 teams in the MAC. Could be a preview of the MAC title game.
How about Washington State holding with the top dogs of the SEC, Ole Miss? This team was written off by, I think, everyone, including myself, when North Texas put down a 59-10 beating on them earlier in this year, and then Washington followed that up with a 59-24 beating. We all thought, okay, this Pac-2 thing, these teams, they've fallen fast. But no, Washington State beat Colorado State last week 20-3. We just saw what Colorado State did to Fresno. Then they go to Ole Miss and nearly pull off the upset of the year. I started looking into Washington State, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? They have a year one head coach, and I remember when this man was hired, and I was like, that is a good hire. But I completely forgot about this hire. They hired Jimmy Rogers away from South Dakota State. Rogers is a national title winning coach for the Jackrabbits at South Dakota State and proved to be one of the best coaches in the FCS. And he's a coach that I believe in, and that we're starting to see this scrappy Washington State, turn some heads with the way that they're playing football.
Another cool thing about Washington State, for what I believe, maybe for the first time for the season, certainly for the first time in any of these the games that we've paid close attention to, Washington State lost a game and got points added to their rating. They were so far behind Ole Miss, who we have in the top 5 of our model last week, and yet they were able to lead for chunks of this game. They kept it close. They had a shot towards the very end to actually take this. They would have skyrocketed upward if they had secured that win. They lost, and they still ended up with positive rating points. Here you see they went up 115 rating points. Only about 10 or 15 of that was from the game. The rest were opponent adjustments because they have beaten teams that have won and played teams close that have won in past weeks. They move up 14 spots in the model despite losing because the model realized Washington State is better than where we had them before.
And Washington State has one signature victory that we're forgetting about, and that was all the way in week 2. They beat San Diego State 36-13. San Diego State also in this honorable mention slide. Kennesaw State, guys. Kennesaw State.
Andrew, can I give you a Kennesaw State football history lesson?
Yes.
Kennesaw State, their football program, the entire program, has only been in existence for 10 years. And it has already, last year was its first year in the FBS ranks. In its short-term life there in the FCS ranks, it was a force in the Big South Conference. They won the conference in their 3rd year of existence. Insane. Last year, they went 2-10. They had only had one head coach their entire existence. Last year, Brian Bohannon, he took them to the FBS jump. They went 2-10, and they decided to part ways with the man. I feel a little bit sad for him. Started up the program, led him through the FCS, led him to multiple playoff appearances, and then things got rough there at the end, and they decided at the FBS level they needed to bring in a new coach. So that they did. They went out and brought in Jerry Mack, who was the running back coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars at the time, and now they are here. They just slayed the mighty Louisiana Tech Bulldogs.
The CUSA darlings of the model last week.
The darlings of the model. And now they are saying, hey, we want to be the darlings. We here are ready in our 10th year of existence of ever playing football, want to be in the top 50 of the SND.
You ready for this? Kennesaw State's rank by week in the S&D 50 model. 131, 128. 129, 124, 93, 84, 78, 58. A true meteoric rise over 7 weeks of play.
They're now 3 spots ahead of Louisiana Tech, and they are the highest rated Conference USA team in the model this week.
Wake Forest at 57. Wake Forest has climbed in week 1. They were rated 99th in the model. They now sit at 57. If they had pulled off that game against Georgia Tech, who knows where they'd be right now?
It seems like we got a lot of connections here in our honorable mentions because Washington State's head coach, made the move, Jake Dickert, to Wake Forest, and this is his first year there.
Guess who Wake Forest beat 10-9 in week 1?
I saw this same thing today,
Kennesaw
Andrew.
State. Wake Forest beat Kennesaw State 10-9. And when I first saw this score, I believe it was week 0. Sorry, not week 1. In week 0, Wake Forest beats Kennesaw State 10-9. And I thought Wake Forest is down. They're still down. They're not bouncing back. Here we are 7 weeks later. No. That was a very important competitive game between two very good teams in the FBS.
And the only people recognizing this are the people paying attention to the SND model, because it is now showing us, whoa, that was a very good game between two very good teams. And Kennesaw State, the difference in that 10-9 game from not even going to overtime, which is funny because here they are 57-58. It was a missed extra point.
Amazing. San Diego State, you ready for their rankings week by week in our model? 133 out of 136 is where they started. 133, 109, 117, 120, 83, 72, 63, 53. Another team that has come up from the slums of the FBS to now knocking on the door of the 50. And with a couple more wins, they're in the 50. Their only loss is to who? Washington State. 36-13. They beat Cal and IU. They clobbered Colorado State. They clobbered Nevada. Good team. And getting the credit they deserve.
Getting votes in the AP this week, too.
And living in some Boise State Reddit threads, Boise fans are very scared of San Diego State right now.
As they should be. Before we unveil the top 50, again, subscribe to the channel. Here is the S&D 50, Week 8, teams 46 through 50. At number 50, down 26 spots, TCU. They lost to Kansas State 41-28. At number 49, up 12 spots. Back in the S&D 50, the Colorado Buffaloes beat Iowa State 24-17. At number 48, down 17 spots, North Texas is clobbered by South Florida 63-36. At number 47, holding their spot, Florida lost to Texas A&M 34-17. And at 46, down 12 spots, South Carolina loses at LSU 20-10.
They are gritty. Caden Salter, just an athlete if I've ever seen one.
Caden Salter he's a solid quarterback. He's fun to watch. Great TV. And it's also just interesting to note here they are with a losing record at 3-4 and still in the top 50 because almost every single one of their games has been competitive.
Against teams in the S&D 50 for the most part. I think it's time to say that Dion can coach quarterbacks. I don't think it's a fluke now.
I mean, he's only had 2.
But they're both pretty good.
I mean, but it's still only 2. I'm not slamming. I'm not trying to throw shade on Dion. I think he's a good coach. What he's done for that program is truly incredible. I think, to your point, Jacob, I think they've only really had one bad outing all year, and that was at Houston. Even their game at TCU was, a lot closer than the score suggested. We already mentioned Georgia Tech and Wake Forest almost taking down Georgia Tech. That was Colorado's opening game, and they only lost by a touchdown.
Impressive.
They have a lot ahead of them, too. Interestingly, their next game is against Utah. We'll talk more about Utah later. Could be an opportunity for Colorado capitalizing on the aftermath of however this weekend plays out for the Utes.
North Texas at 48. I had such high hopes for North Texas. Drew Mestamaker throws interception after interception, and South Florida just punishes North Texas with every turnover it feels turned into a touchdown.
Hey, but it was in front of a sellout crowd, so
sure was. Blackout.
First ever sellout crowd in school history. And the third quarter, I will say the game was tied at half, and there was just a third quarter meltdown. The game was lost in the matter of 5 minutes 28 points was scored by South Florida in under 5 minutes. So after that 5 minutes transpired, there was no coming back.
I do find it interesting that the model keeps North Texas in. I didn't think they would stay in.
And I still like their future. They have one of the easier schedules in the American. They just have one more bully to face in the American, and that's Navy, who's undefeated, who we'll see higher up in this model. But every other game, honestly, I think they should be favored in.
Florida at 47 is really interesting. Everyone on the fire Billy Napier wagon right now. I still think Florida's a good team, and the score does not reflect how closely they played Texas A&M. It's fun to see Florida play these good teams week after week and still have fight.
A&M was only up 24-17 going into the fourth quarter. That was a game.
It absolutely was.
We saw them get a boost, a pretty sizable boost, not from the game that they played, but from past opponents. Florida gained almost 60 points from past opponent adjustment. And they're getting most of that from Texas beating OU.
South Carolina, same story as Florida. Down 12 spots, but still in the 50, played LSU very competitively for 4 whole quarters. Still in the hunt in terms of being in the S&D 50 and making noise.
Man, I watched that game was full of bad breaks for the Gamecocks. LSU is really good. Garrett Nussmeier can play. For some reason, they still can't really score, which is kind of shocking. South Carolina, some bad breaks led to that loss.
Teams 41 through 45. At 45, down 23 spots. Iowa State lost to Colorado 24-17. At 44, up 6 spots, James Madison with a win over Louisiana 24-14. At number 43, up 16 spots, cracking the S&D 50 for the first time this season, Southern Miss.
Welcome.
Welcome, Southern Miss. They beat Georgia Southern 38-35. At number 42, up 15 spots, back in the S&D 50 after being out, Iowa beat Wisconsin 37-0. And at number 41, up 11 spots, they were out of it last week. They're back again this week. The Texas Longhorns beat OU, as Jacob said, 23-6.
Yeah, I think we're going to get some criticism potentially for Texas still being at 41. Like if this were a top 25 poll, we still wouldn't have Texas in it despite beating Oklahoma. And that's because this model isn't just about the most recent game or the expectations for the future. We don't care that, Arch Manning actually put together a game that was reputable, if not outstanding. We don't care that Texas has its whole schedule in front of it. We just care about the fact that this team's already lost twice. This is their first big win.
Signature win.
It's actually a first win against a Power 4 opponent all season. So they still have a lot to prove, and our model is not going to give them all of the credit that maybe the AP or voters at large are giving them just yet. They've still got something to prove before they really go higher in the model.
The AP poll has Texas at 21 this week. Iowa at 42 feels right, my friends. We said it last week, Iowa being out of the 50 felt wrong. They blank Wisconsin, and here they are at 42, up 15 spots, jumping right back in.
I'm honestly surprised Luke Fickell hasn't been fired yet after the showing like that against Iowa.
Do you think in the era of NIL and of the playoff that you're going to see as many power G5 coaches, to kind of refer to the top G5 schools? You think you're going to see as many of those coaches leave for marquee, Big Ten and SEC jobs like we used to? Or you think that's kind of on the downward trend?
No, I think it's still going to happen.
Look at James Franklin. The money's too good. If you can get the right contract, the buyout's the buyout.
Yeah, I've
worth
heard
a shot.
It's life-changing money, Spencer. They're going to take it.
Sure, but is Penn State going to go for a G5 coach anyway? Or are they going to go for like Kurt Signetti or an Ohio State assistant or something like that?
Well, I mean, we saw Indiana going for Kirk Signetti, paid some heavy dividends off, which they went straight to a Sun Belt Conference coach who only had a couple years even coaching FBS ball. So I think it will still happen. But you're right. Maybe the bigger schools like Penn State, I think they might go for more the coaches that have more P5 experiences. I agree, but they can also pay a little more than like the Indianas of the world.
Maybe they'll go for Brian Kelly.
Speaking, I'm going right over that joke. Speaking of Curt Cignetti, James Madison at 44. Hello.
Yeah. How about we talk about James Madison a little bit?
Let's do it. We haven't done it all year.
You know, Curt Cignetti was a great coach there. Great coach. But James Madison overall is just a great program. They win there. And their current head coach, Bob Chesney, he is nothing to slouch at. The guy previously was coaching at Holy Cross, where he took Holy Cross to 4 consecutive playoff appearances. Holy Cross is not a good FCS program, not at all. And he had them humming. Just for example, Holy Cross this year is 0-6 without him. Bob Chesney is got the Dukes rolling, and right now with ODU losing this past week, and now a showdown with ODU, a win against Old Dominion this week would be huge in putting them in the lead and as the favorite to win the Sun Belt and potentially even make a playoff push.
You know who their only loss was to, though, right? Louisville Cardinals.
Yes. Louisville.
Just want to throw that out there.
Of course. Iowa State at 45, ravaged by injury. I think they will keep dropping, but it doesn't mean they're a bad team. They just have had some bad breaks.
Now, we cannot move on without talking about Southern Miss, guys.
Best for last.
They were 1-11 last year, and their one win came against an FCS team. So 0 FBS wins last year. They fire their head coach. They go on a search, and you know what they do? They go and win over the coach who just won the Sun Belt title at Marshall, who apparently was having a contract dispute and they couldn't get an extension laid down, Charles Huff.
Southern Miss jumped in on it.
Yes, and Southern Miss says, hey, Marshall won't give you what you want. Come over here. We want you. We'll pay you $200,000 more. That's all he got more. I don't know if that's what Marshall was, what their holdup was. I really want an insider from Marshall to tell me what was the dispute, because everything I'm seeing just says it was a mutual departure between Charles Huff and Marshall. So they get the conference winning coach to come over. He brings over an offensive coordinator who is a former head coach of Utah State, won the Mountain West at Utah State, Blake Anderson, who got fired in a controversial way that you can just dive into that. That's a whole nother story of if he should have been fired or not at Utah State. And then he brings his defensive coordinator with him. He brings his quarterback with him. And they are now looking like the favorites in the West of the Sun Belt to come out after just being the bottom feeders last year. This is insane, the turnaround we're seeing from Southern Miss.
Week 1, Southern Miss was ranked 123 out of 136 in the model. They are now number 43. You can make up some ground over the course of a season in this model. Teams 36 through 40. At number 40, down 24 spots, Arizona State lost to Utah 42-10. At number 39, up 12 spots, back in the S&D 50, the SMU Ponies beat Stanford 34-10. At number 38, down 8 spots, Kansas, again getting beat by a really good Big 12 team, Texas Tech 42-17. At number 37, up 8 spots, the Baylor Bears, they're on a bye. At number 36, up 13 spots, Houston beat Oklahoma State 39-17.
This is a Big 12 slide, top to bottom. I know SMU is in the ACC, but you know who their only 2 losses are this year? Baylor and TCU.
There you go.
Big 12.
This is why the Big 12 is a gauntlet. All of these teams, you play them week in and week out. They will shift. They will move within this 50 all year long. You do not want to play these teams.
SMU's that team we kind of bit forgot about because they had those 2 losses early on against the Big 12. But like you said, Spencer, undefeated in the ACC, and gosh, the ACC just seems wide open for that championship spot. So we'll see
to play Miami.
Wide open to play Miami.
Exactly. You're right. The spot to play Miami is wide open.
Now, SMU does play Miami in November, but interestingly, their next game coming up this weekend is actually at Clemson. So we'll see if Clemson can turn it around or if SMU continues to push them further down.
Clemson, who we have not seen crack the top 50 yet since their fall.
Kansas on a bye. Kansas State on a bye. Both teams on a collision course. Kansas has lost now to Texas Tech and Cincinnati, 2 of the higher-rated teams in the S&P 50 this week. Kansas State just dominated TCU. We're going to have a sunflower showdown here that is really going to make Kansas or Kansas State catapult into this S&P 50 for Week 9.
This is a Kansas team, too, that only lost to Cincinnati by 3 points. Lost to Missouri in a really close game at Missouri, obviously. Their only real handily loss that was truly handed to them was by Texas Tech, who, I mean, they're the Miami of the Big 12. I don't know that anyone in the Big 12 can compete with Texas Tech right now, but Kansas can compete with anyone else.
So that Houston-Oklahoma State game, per usual, Oklahoma State getting blown out. This was in Stillwater, though. Not sure if you guys saw this, but the stands are pretty empty in Stillwater this year. They are not supporting this. They are not supporting this team very well. And what happened was a few guys decided to go up.
One guy at the start
went up into an empty section, took his shirt off, started swinging it around, got the camera on him, the big screen on him, and slowly more guys started migrating up to this section until this section was completely full of shirtless guys swinging their shirt around. That is how the Oklahoma State fans cheer on their team as they're getting their butts kicked by the Houston Cougars.
It was by the end, there were 4 whole sections of the stadium. 4 blocks of seats up in the balcony that were just full of shirtless middle-aged men and students. It didn't start with a student either. It started with a 40-year-old man.
I'm 40.
Mike Gundy would have been
to summon Gundy. We can't go on podcast without saying Mike Gundy. I'm a man. I'm 40. That's so good. Houston this week hosts Arizona. Should be a good game between 2 really good teams.
Oh yeah, I feel like that team is good. That game is going to be like, hey, who's for real here in the Big 12? Like, who's ready to compete right now this year? Is it Houston or Arizona? We'll find out this week.
Both have looked great. Teams 31 through 35. At 35, up 18 spots. Back in the S&D 50. They were out completely last week. Now at 35, Boise State. They beat New Mexico 41-25. At 34, up a spot, Duke, they were on a bye. At number 33, up 5 spots, Spencer's Louisville Cardinals, they were on a bye. At number 32, up 16 spots. This team was in the S&D 50 last week. They're even higher this week. Northwestern beat Penn State 22-21. At number 31, up 2 spots, Mississippi State on a bye.
So speaking of that Boise game, as they're back, and you can never forget about the Broncos, they had to have a 21-point fourth quarter to pull away from New Mexico. Going into that fourth, it was very much a game. It had a lot of Boise fans talking and still worried about this team, but I think it just goes to show New Mexico is a solid team. This is going down a rabbit hole here, but is Jason Eck going to go coach at Wisconsin when they fire Luke Fickell? But anyways, that's where he played at. That got me thinking, is New Mexico going to lose a coach after year 1 again? But Boise State did what they were supposed to do, dispatch of New Mexico. It took a big fourth quarter, but they put it together.
UCLA couldn't beat New Mexico, so hey, maybe.
You guys want to know something interesting? Louisville and Duke are ranked neck and neck right here. Both of them are on a bye. Both of them this week play two ACC teams. I won't share where they are, but there are two ACC teams that are also neck and neck up higher in the model, Miami and Georgia Tech. You know, they both, Miami was also on a bye. Georgia Tech was on something of a bye playing Virginia Tech this past week, but a couple of big time ACC showdowns coming up this week. That Louisville Miami game on Friday night, that is going to be big time. A really big barometer for the strength of the middle of this ACC conference. I think we can comfortably say Louisville is not the standard bearer. I do think they have a chance to upset Miami, obviously. I think Miami is the favorite and should win this without much trouble. But then again, Miami almost let Florida State get back into it. And Louisville, we have had consistently rated higher than Florida State throughout the year.
Northwestern. Not a shock to this group. Jacob said it last week. Northwestern was rated ahead of Penn State. Northwestern beat Penn State. Again, not a predictive model, but Northwestern did what they were supposed to do, beat Penn State 22-21. Northwestern, how about it, guys? A laughingstock of the Big Ten, no more.
Should we be talking about how good of a coach David Braun is?
Yes.
Should Penn
Absolutely.
State be trying to get him to come over, say, hey, you made us...
Why not?
You made us pay $58 million to get the other guy out of town, so at least come help us out now.
Hey, it's not as expensive this week as it was last week. It's a little cheaper, I think.
Our stadium holds a couple more people than yours. Come on over. Both are under construction, but hey, that's all good.
Shout out, though, to David Brown, two-time national champion as the defensive coordinator for North Dakota State.
Man, the FCS connections never stop, Jacob. I love it. I live for that part of this podcast.
Mississippi State has Florida this week, another team in the S&D 50. Teams 26 through 30. At 30, up 16 spots. South Florida with a win over North Texas, 63-36. At 29, down 22 spots. Oklahoma loses to Texas, 23-6. At 28, down a spot. Virginia on a bye. At 27, up 9 spots. The Nebraska Cornhuskers beat Maryland in that thriller, 34-31. And at 26, down 15 spots, Michigan loses to USC, 31-13.
South Florida, honestly, sometimes I'm a little surprised the model doesn't like them more.
Me too.
Still not able to crack the top 25 at 30. They feel better than that. They do, honestly. And their quarterback, Byron Brown, is experienced. The man in 2023 had over 3,000 yards passing. Last year had his season derailed with injuries, and he's looking like he's going to hit that mark, that 3,000 mark this year, maybe more. They just dispatched of a really good North Texas team at their place. I'm excited to see what South Florida has to offer.
The reason South Florida has been lagging in the model is that they started a fair bit lower, had 2 good wins, were zooming up through the ranks, and then they just got hammered by Miami. They lost by nearly 40 points. It was not competitive. They were, high off of their 2-point win at Florida and just completely collapsed. And Miami at the time, the model still had sliding up. They weren't in the top 10 like they were last week. We'll see them in there again this week. And so it wasn't a sure thing in the model that they were getting blown out by one of the best teams in the country. Their next big test 2 weeks from now at Memphis. That's really when they're going to be able to prove that they belong, not just in the top 25, but even higher, that they belong as maybe the favorite in the American.
I'm with Jacob. South Florida feels like the Iowa of last week. South Florida, to me, though they move up 16 spots, I would like to see them even higher. So as they continue to win, they will ascend, as Spencer had mentioned. Oklahoma at 29, I'd like to have a conversation about if you're injured, should you play?
Poor John Mateer.
Jacob, what say ye?
If you're going to throw 3 interceptions, no.
Everyone wants to have their flu game, Everyone, when they're sick, wants to just tough it out, vomit on the sidelines, go out and throw 4 touchdowns. If you want a long-term career in the sport, and just in general, I'm definitely on the side of if you're hurt, don't play.
Virginia on a bye this week. They play Washington State, an honorable mention team. Virginia better be about their business because Washington State plays no games.
No, this is going to be a game I'm going to keep my eye on, really, to see how Washington State plays against this ACC team. The ACC has underperformed out of conference. That's why we see Virginia still not cracking the top 25. The model has accounted for that. I'm excited to see how they do against a non-conference opponent here in the pesky Washington State team.
Nebraska, 27. I call this a success. For them to be this far in the season in the 20s, I think it's a huge success compared to where they've been in prior years.
I was looking at Nebraska and what the model was thinking with them, because I know a lot of Nebraska fans think they should be higher than this. And they actually lost points for past opponent adjustments because both those Michigan teams that they played previously got both blown out. And so those Michigan teams aren't helping Nebraska out.
Nebraska the rest of the way. They have Minnesota this week. They have Northwestern, USC, UCLA, Penn State, and Iowa remaining on the schedule. Truly a very difficult schedule that at the beginning of the year you would have thought there were some gimmies in there, but I don't see a lot of gimmies here. And Michigan, poor Michigan, loses to USC 31-13.
Yeah, and here's the thing, USC too, their only loss this year was a morning game at Illinois, so they had to travel 2 time zones only to play in the morning, which would have felt like 6 a.m. to them probably. And every other game that USC has played, they have not only won, but won handily. I think that Michigan could receive a little bit of a reconciliatory bump for that game against USC if USC plays how the model expects them to. And then USC goes and plays Nebraska right after that.
Teams 21 through 25. At 25, up 7 spots, the Washington Huskies beat Rutgers 38-19. At 24, up 5 spots, UNLV beat Air Force in a game of games, 51-48. At 23, up 3 spots, another G5 team that had a game, must-watch game, Navy, beats Temple in a thriller, 32-31. Vanderbilt at 22, up 3 spots. They're on a bye. Missouri at 21, down 13 spots, loses to Alabama 27-24.
There's some really good G5 games this past week.
That Air Force game, I thought it was over 3 or 4 times, and then I checked the final score, and UNLV wins. Insane.
It took until the last minute for them to win. There was 42 total points between the two teams scored in the fourth quarter alone. And UNLV's the last touchdown came with 36 seconds left.
23, 24, 25. None of these teams have any consideration to be in the top 25 this week. We have them this high. Why, Spencer?
Because of their performance on the field, not because of the brands that they have, but because of the games they've strung together. And you'll notice Navy and UNLV aren't picking up big swaths of rating points. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see our S&D ratings at this point, we're in the 5,400s. By the time we cross over to number 1, we'll have crossed 6,000. So there's a gap between Navy and UNLV and our number 1 team this week. But they're not really earning a ton of points in the model for these close wins against teams that the model thinks they should be much better than, but they're just inching up every week, continuing to get points, continuing to get wins. A team like Washington, if they keep winning, they'll pass UNLV and Navy just because they're going to play better competition over the course of the year. But it's not about that brand. It's about the performance every week on the field.
And speaking of Washington, we cannot move on without giving a shout out to their quarterback. He set the school's all-time total offensive yards in one game with 538 yards, 400 plus passing, over 100 rushing, had 4 total TDs. The guy was balling on Saturday.
Washington plays Michigan, and we will preview that later. Navy, let's talk about the end of that Navy game. Around a minute left. Navy's down to Temple, at Temple, to go down the field, score, Go for 2. Get it. The guts, the moxie of that team. I love the midshipmen this year.
The guts to keep rushing the ball with under a minute left in the game from your own side of the field, and then to break a 50-yard touchdown run with 40 seconds left to help win the game and tie it, or give you the chance to go for 2. Where do we stop? How do we even stop talking about them?
Do you expect Navy to pass?
You know what? When it's under a minute and you're on your own side of the field, yes, I do believe there might be a couple pass plays in there.
I mean, laterals are passes, kind of.
You stick to what got you there, and I love it. That's why I love Navy. Vanderbilt this week plays LSU. We will talk about that when we get to LSU, but Vanderbilt here at 22, people have forgotten about them, I think, because they're on the bye. They lost to Alabama. They're still lurking. They are lurking, and LSU needs to be ready. The Missouri Tigers finally play a road game, and they go to Auburn this week.
Oh, how bad does that hurt to have this 6-game homestand to end with Alabama, and you think, if we can just beat them, that's going to set us up for success as we finally decide to take our first field trip. But nope, they can't quite get over the hump against Alabama, and it feels like that homestand was all for nothing.
Back to Hugh Freeze just getting no breaks. Hugh Freeze gets Missouri this week after getting out Georgia. Just poor guy. It just doesn't stop with difficult teams to play, let alone the refs fighting you too.
I hope Auburn is patient with Hugh Freeze. I do believe he's a good coach.
Agreed. Me too.
Missouri, by the way, has not one but 2 road games in a row coming up. 2 Saturdays in a row, no less. So,
oh, wow.
It'll be a novel experience for those Tigers.
Teams 16 through 20. At 20, down 7 spots, losing to Indiana 30-20. The Oregon Ducks at 20. At 19, down 7 spots, Illinois lost to Ohio State 34-16. At 18, up 5 spots, the Georgia Bulldogs beat Auburn 20-10. At 17, up 22 spots, Utah beat Arizona State 42-10. And at 16, up 5 spots, unranked in the AP poll this week, Tulane beat a good East Carolina team 26-19. Oregon, we got a lot of flack for putting Oregon at 13 last week. This week they sit at 20. How do we feel?
Great. That's exactly where they're supposed to be. Their best win is against Northwestern. Northwestern's a good team. That's a good win. But that's it. That is it. This is the biggest atrocity of the AP poll right now. They only dropped them down to 8. This is right where Oregon should be, seeing what we have seen from them so far this year.
And 20 is not a bad spot. People can see
not.
20 and be outraged. To be top 20 in a sport out of 136 teams is amazing with so many more weeks to play.
They can claw their way back up very easily, but this is right now their spot.
The other thing too is I can't figure out like why Oregon gets so much credit outside of the brand. This is just one of those moments for me where it's got to be the brand, I guess, because they won this exciting double overtime game against Penn State, who then got blown out by UCLA and then lost to Northwestern, right? Like, we can't continue to give Oregon credit. The model certainly doesn't, but just in general, we shouldn't give Oregon credit for that win. Like, they won, and maybe that's what sent James Franklin on the spiral out the door, but that win is way less valuable today than it was 2 weeks ago.
Illinois not ranked in the AP poll. 19th, another Big Ten team ahead of Oregon, loses to Ohio State 34-16. I still like the Illini. Obviously, they're not the Ohio States or the Indiana of the Big Ten, but they're still a formidable team having a good season.
I was surprised to see they didn't get dropped further because Ohio State had their way with them. And so I checked the model out. They got 70 points, Illinois. They lost 120 from their game against Ohio State, but they gained 70 points from past opponents. I'm guessing most of that coming from USC clobbering Michigan.
Correct.
USC beating Michigan was a big boost for their resume. Now, I will say that boost tapers off pretty dramatically. We recognize, when we build the model, we recognize that if you beat a team in week 1, and then that team ends up losing a couple games, but turning around in week 5 and wins out the rest of the way, the team that turned it around is not the same team that was defeated in week 1. And
UCLA.
yeah, teams that beat UCLA at the beginning of the season are not going to get as much credit for UCLA's turnaround as the teams who played them right before the turnaround started, or, the teams who play them now.
Another fan base who doesn't like us very much with where we put their team. Georgia at 18, up 5 spots. They beat Auburn. Feels right.
It does. Sorry, go ahead, Jacob. I might rant, so we'll start with you.
Georgia, if you beat Ole Miss this week, I will start paying attention to you.
Agreed. And they absolutely have a shot to. Again, being 18 in this model is amazing. Look at Utah up 22 spots in a single week. You can move. That's how this works.
Yeah, Georgia has a really good win against a good Tennessee team. They have a really good loss against an even better Alabama team. But you got to kind of consider these all on balance. A Tennessee team that barely beat Arkansas. Arkansas, who has got wrecked by Notre Dame, and then went on the road and almost beat Tennessee. And so you'll notice, we haven't talked about Notre Dame yet. And despite the fact that they have 2 losses, they are dominating games and they are putting together really strong performances. Whereas Georgia, really close win, really close loss. In general, playing close against teams that are about as good as they are, according to our model, has not shown that they are a top 10 team. And that will become even more evident as we actually get into the top 10.
Utah at 17. I told you Rice Eccles was better at night. Rice Eccles is better at night. Utah should only play at night. I don't know who needs to hear it. Utah should only play at night. Beat Arizona State 42-10.
It's got to feel great after getting beat by nearly the same margin at home against Texas Tech a few weeks ago.
Which now we see that Texas Tech is pretty good, so that loss doesn't look as bad now. Tulane, the most disrespected team currently there is. Let's give Tulane some credit right now.
How does Tulane, their only loss comes to a top 5 Ole Miss team, and somehow the AP poll will not give them any of their dues?
Brand.
Right? Or look at Oregon. Look at that. And Indiana clearly looked like the better team.
Tulane has beat Northwestern. Tulane has beat Duke. Tulane is humming.
They just beat an East Carolina team that's just outside of the S&D top 50.
Correct.
They got a couple easy games coming up, though. Easier, I should say. Army and UTSA. But then they've got a date with Memphis, too, also on the road in early November. American schedules lead through Memphis.
And speaking of Memphis, teams 11 through 15. At 15, up 3 spots. Memphis, they were on a bye. At 14, up 3 spots. Cincinnati, they beat UCF 20-11. At 13, up 6 spots. Tennessee, they beat Arkansas 34-31. At number 12, up 16 spots. USC beat Michigan 31-13. And at number 11, up 9 spots, Notre Dame. They beat NC State 36-7.
One thing I'll say about Memphis, obviously we've got some big things to talk about up higher, but Memphis at 15 not only feels right, but Memphis is going to get the chance to prove whether or not they deserve that spot, and really whether or not they deserve a playoff spot, because they play all 3 of the best teams in the American this year. In the post-division era of college football that we've entered everywhere but the Sun Belt, you can have a schedule where you avoid all the big dogs in your conference and you only have to put out once in the conference title game to make it to the playoffs. I'm looking at USCC schedules. The Memphis Tigers have to play South Florida, then 2 weeks later, Tulane, 2 weeks after that to end the season, Navy. Now, they're all home games. That works in their favor, but they have to play all 3 of those teams to cement their position at the top of the American, and then they'll probably have to play one of them again in the title game.
Cincinnati fans, you better start believing. I was talking to one earlier this week. They still didn't believe even after that Iowa State win. They still didn't believe after this UCF win. Start believing. The model respects you. You guys are here to do damage in the Big 12.
Their remaining schedule: Oklahoma State, Baylor, Utah, Arizona, BYU, TCU. This is doable.
Very doable. It's going to be fun to see if they can hold up. 14 at Cincinnati. Whew. It looks like they might finally be back after Luke Fickell left them.
Tennessee at 13. They beat Arkansas. They play Alabama. Should be a good one.
Road game for them. Alabama gets to play this game in Tuscaloosa. I think that if you're Tennessee, your big concern is how do you slow down Ty Simpson? I don't know that Tennessee has shown, especially, in that game against Arkansas, Taylon Green really had his way against the Tennessee defense. That's a close score, and it was genuinely a close game. I really thought that Arkansas had it, and Tennessee was able to hold out through the fourth quarter and take the win. But Arkansas scored 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns, made it a close game. They cannot give that much leeway to an opposing quarterback if they want to win against Alabama.
USC plays Notre Dame this week. This is a number 11 versus number 12. We will preview more of this at the end of the podcast. But man, USC and Notre Dame both having great, great seasons.
This was one that USC, the model was on too early on. If you guys remember a few weeks back before they played Illinois, they were top 10 in the model. And
Top
I was
five.
top five. I was hating on it. I was questioning it. I was saying this model seems a little off to me on this one. Now they took that loss and they took a pretty big tumble, but with time, truth is revealed, and USC is showing that they are potentially a top 10, maybe even top 5, we'll see, team. And the model was showing us, hey, start paying attention to this team now.
Is this an example of maybe sometimes you should keep your coach around and see what he can do because he's probably a good coach?
100%.
One of the stories of the game, they had a couple injuries at running back happen, and so their running back depth was really low. And they somehow at halftime got approval to take the injury tag off of one of their running backs who hadn't dressed all year. Brian Jackson comes in, and he has the game-sealing touchdown there in the fourth quarter to put the game away and make it 3 scores with just under 5 minutes to play. And pretty cool story to see this guy come in, didn't even dress, wasn't even going to play. And here he is cinching the game away.
Notre Dame at 11. Notre Dame at their low this year. Remember, they started this year number 5 in the S&D 50. The lowest they got to was number 55, and that was in week 3. They now get all the way back to 11. We said that, if you go back and listen, we said Notre Dame's down and out right now, but they have every opportunity to come back because of their schedule. The losses they have don't look so bad now. And again, they can keep stringing together massive wins by beating USC.
Hey, remember when I said NC State would be 6-0 before playing Notre Dame? All right, I could eat my own words here.
We're not always right. The S&D 50 top 10 week 8 at number 10 up 5 spots. BYU. They beat Arizona 33-27 in double overtime. At number 9 up 5 spots. LSU. They beat South Carolina 20-10. At number 8 up 2 spots. Georgia Tech. They beat Virginia Tech 35-20. At number 7 down 2 spots. The Miami Hurricanes. They were on a bye. And at number 6, the Alabama Crimson Tide with that great win against Missouri, 27-24.
I'd never know what to do with BYU. They remind me of the G5 teams we've already talked about where they just inch up and inch up and inch up, and you're almost waiting for them to lose. And last year, that didn't happen until they were like 10-0 or 9-0, and then they finally dropped the game. Big rivalry game this week against Utah. I don't know if it's going to happen this week either.
BYU at 10 feels a little too high, whereas we have South Florida that feels a little too low, or last week Iowa felt a little too low.
If BYU is to beat Utah, then I will say number 10 is warranted. Utah is a really good team.
LSU at 9. LSU is another team like BYU where you see the offense play. They are winning these games, but you watch it and it leaves you, are they? They did win, but it wasn't pretty. LSU at 9.
I guess they're a great SEC team. Like, that's how I feel.
Brian Kelly will tell you they are.
Brian, I don't want to get into what Brian Kelly will tell you, but like, Garrett Nussmeier, I guess he's a good quarterback. I said BYU's a mystery.
Yes.
LSU might be even more so.
Yes. And this week we'll find out. They're playing Vanderbilt, a good measuring stick game for them.
And it's a road game for them, too. Their last trip on the road, this is only their third road game of the season. Their first one was a close, hard-fought win at Clemson that did not age well.
Correct.
And then their second road game was a close, hard-fought loss at Ole Miss that aged a lot better. So we'll see how they do on the road at Vanderbilt this weekend.
Georgia Tech at 8. Georgia Tech this week has Duke. Big game in the ACC.
Louisville and Duke stacked right on top of each other. Play Miami and Georgia Tech stacked right up each other at the top. These two are apparently on a collision course for an ACC title game matchup.
And these two teams, Georgia Tech in the AP poll this week is 12. That feels a little low. And Miami is 2, which feels a little high. We have them at 7 and 8, splitting the difference. That feels right to me. Alabama at 6. I think Kalen DeBoer deserves his credit. Kalen DeBoer, a year ago, fans are raging that he's dressing too casual on the sidelines. Now it's all about his black hoodie of death that he's undefeated in. It's just a dry fit shirt with a hood. Still not the most formal thing to wear on the sidelines, but now they're winning. So now his attire is to be feared, right? And the question will be, if they can beat Missouri, if they beat Georgia, and they can beat Tennessee in the third Saturday in October, and they're puffing those cigars at the end of the game, Alabama, they're back.
One thing I love about the model is our rating points. So for those of you who are not watching on YouTube, I just want to make a quick call out here of the jump between 7 and 8. So this is the jump between Georgia Tech, whose S&D rating is 5680, and Miami, whose S&D rating is 5767, almost a 100-point gap right there. And Georgia Tech, by the way, only 10 points ahead of LSU. LSU is only 3 points ahead of BYU. The gaps tend to range. You'll get little clusters of teams really tight together. And then maybe you'll jump 30 or 40 points to the next group up. This is a very big jump from Georgia Tech at 8 to Miami at 7. And so our model really sees a group here from 7 to 5 and then a final group from 1 through 4. Just want to make that call. And even though we'll talk about it in top 10 and top 5 terms, that jump from Georgia Tech to Miami is a pretty big one. And we think that resume-wise, Miami, Alabama, and the number 5 team that we'll reveal quickly, they're in a league a step up from everyone we've seen so far.
If you're interested to see the true difference in these ratings, we publish them on our Patreon every week. Please join. You can doom scroll our spreadsheets with those who like to do that type of stuff. Teams 1 through 5 at number 5, up 4 spots. Texas Tech clobbers Kansas 42-17. At number 4, down 3 spots. Texas A&M with a win against Florida 34-17. At number 3, controversial, Ole Miss beats Washington State 24-21. At number 2, Indiana beats Oregon 30-20. And at number 1, back in the driver's seat, deservedly so, the Ohio State Buckeyes beat Illinois 34-16.
I will say the order's a little different, but our top 7 does match the AP top 7. The voters do catch up to us eventually. They figure it out. If you're on a bye, you're not getting any credit. If you're winning a super close game against Washington State, you're not going to get nearly as many points as you're going to get if you clobber a fellow top 20, top 30 team like we saw with Indiana and Ohio State. And even Texas A&M, they slid relative to Ole Miss. They dropped just below them, had a better win against Florida, but that they're within 3 points of each other in our S&D rating. That 59-34 for Ole Miss, 59-31 for Texas A&M, neck and neck right there. And then you got another little pop to Indiana and a big jump to Ohio State, who has clearly established itself, like we saw earlier in the year against Texas, as the number one team in the country, the true team to beat.
Texas Tech at 5 feels right. The Big 12 is theirs to lose. Are we in agreement?
100%. And they have like a pretty, dare I say, easy schedule the rest of the way. They've got a road game against Arizona State, who's reeling, who has an injured quarterback. They've got a road game against a surging Kansas State that could maybe prove to be their trickiest test. And then they get to play BYU at home later in the year. Who knows if BYU is going to be the same team in a month that they are right now. The other games are against Oklahoma State, UCF, and West Virginia. They probably have the clearest, if not just outright the easiest path to the playoff of any team on this entire list.
All I have to say is the model has had us on to Indiana from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That we knew they were for real. We knew they were top 10. We knew they were top 5 just a few weeks ago.
Top 2.
Yes.
2.
Yes, the model's been on it. And finally, it's good to see the rest of the country catch up.
This is, in the AP poll terms, the highest Indiana's ever been ranked in program history. We were on this 2 weeks ahead of time. So, for any sickos out there who you want to be cool and tell your buddies who's on the rise, watch our show. Tell them about it.
That's why I love this, because this model really puts you on to the teams that are overrated and the teams that are underrated.
Ole Miss, that team at 3. People are going to ask, why are they still at 3 when they had such a close win against Washington State? Spencer can answer that. But before he does, Ole Miss at 3. We had Ole Miss at 1 a couple weeks ago. Again, Ole Miss in the AP poll this week, 5. No one's disagreeing. We were on it early.
Yeah, and Ole Miss did not really get a ton of points. I mentioned earlier that Washington State didn't lose points despite losing a game. They got 10 rating points for losing to Ole Miss. And guess how many Ole Miss got for beating lowly Washington State? 19. We compare that to Texas Tech, who got 120 points straight up for beating Kansas, not counting any past opponent adjustments. Indiana and Ohio State both got about 100 points for their wins. Mississippi didn't really get a lot of credit for that. The reason that they actually got as many points, that bump of 70 points, is because of this past opponent adjustment where we reconcile your rating a little bit based on how teams play. And who did they beat? They beat LSU. LSU turned around and won a big game. Tulane, another win recently of theirs. Tulane keeps on winning, and that credit will taper off. But you better believe if Washington State comes out swinging and they beat Virginia on the road this week, that Ole Miss is going to get another bump because they just beat Washington State. And it turns out those Cougars are good.
Correct.
And how cool is it that Ole Miss has a QB that was just playing D2 ball last year? Not even FCS, but D2 at Ferris State. Won a national championship there, and that was his first year starting. He was the backup there for his first couple years there at Ferris. He wasn't even playing immediately.
It's amazing.
What a great pickup for Ole Miss, and great to see him execute and have the chance. You know, injuries are terrible, but when the next man up gets to come and truly play that part, it's always an awesome story. I love college football.
I think we have a situation, Spencer, where Trinidad Chambliss might have taken the job from Austin Simmons. Lane Kiffin was asked the other day about if the job was Austin Simmons when he returned back, and he was very vague in his answer.
Definitely,
and was just basically saying, we'll see. Trinidad Chambliss has passed for 300 yards in 3 of his 4 starts. The man is balling.
This is why I love having Jacob on this show. In this new age of college football, when you listen to this show, if you hear what's happening, these G5, these FCS, these D2 players become the farm system for these juggernaut teams with money to come get these guys, pull them in, put them on their roster, and they start to perform. And this is what's so fun to watch. And so people can argue and say the sport is broken, and there are problems. The sport is not without its problems, but this is one of the bright sides that I love about college football right now is you can literally take a line and say, oh, this guy won a national championship last year. Here he is now balling at Ole Miss.
And hey, Georgia fans, you want to show that you belong in the top 10? Beat Ole Miss this week. We'll talk.
Yeah, because speaking of Trinidad, just one more thing on him. He didn't even want to leave Ferris State after last year. His coaches literally had to tell him, hey, you're good. You might want to see what kind of money you can get at the bigger schools.
It's amazing.
And he wasn't getting much steam in the recruiting world. In fact, you know what coach and what team wanted him the most and looked like the front runner? Our boy, Casey Keeler at Temple, was headed to Temple for his first year. He wanted Trinidad bad, and it looked like they were going to get him. Ole Miss swoops in just before his recruiting visit to Temple. Lane Kiffin does his sweet talking, says it makes him feel like he's family, and he commits to Ole Miss right then and there. Plus, they offered double the money that Temple was offering.
I imagine that helped.
Yeah.
Sidebar, Penn State should really look at Casey Keeler for their next coaching job. Just public service announcement.
The dude's from Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Miss's remaining schedule: Georgia, Oklahoma, South Carolina, the Citadel, a bye, basically, Florida, and Mississippi State. Very manageable down the stretch.
Yeah, the hardest part of that is the fact that their two toughest opponents remaining, Georgia and Oklahoma, are both road games.
But they catch Oklahoma at a good time if John Mateer is still on the mend.
That's true.
Indiana at 2. Kurt Cignetti gets his credit. Google him. He wins. Their remaining schedule, they have a bye this week, and then they have UCLA, Maryland, Penn State, Wisconsin, Purdue. Ohio State's remaining schedule: Wisconsin, Penn State, Purdue, UCLA, Rutgers, Michigan. I think it's pretty safe to say we can almost book the Big Ten title game as Ohio State, Indiana, and it will be a banger.
You don't know my favorite thing about those schedules you just walked through? Can you imagine if 2 weeks ago we said, in all seriousness, that UCLA is going to be a tougher test for these two teams than Penn State down the stretch? We would have been laughed out of the building. I mean, we weren't saying it, to be clear. We weren't out here being a savant and predicting that UCLA was going to go on this big surge. And honestly, really genuinely seems like they've turned it around there.
Probably will be in the 50s shortly.
Probably. They've got 4 losses, so they've got some ground to cover when you consider that those 4 losses sent them pretty low. I think they bottomed out near or under 100. I'd have to double check, but it's so funny to me that it turns out Penn State's probably going to be the easier game for both of them. Unless Penn State turns it around under an interim coach, we'll see.
UCLA bottomed out at 122. They now sit at 66. It's an ascent.
Hey, there's just a couple wins from being in the 50. In the Big Ten, that's easy. If you're like Louisiana Lafayette and you're at 122 or something, and you go on
a long way to climb.
On a win streak to end your season, you'll probably finish in like the 70s or 60s, maybe. But that's because you're not playing at Indiana and hosting Nebraska and at Ohio State, Washington, after that at USC. Like UCLA.
Wins to be had.
Wins to be had. They definitely could make schedules really difficult for the favorites.
Ohio State at 1. Spencer, you did the differential earlier. Ohio State at 1 in our ratings for those watching on YouTube. They have now crossed the 6,000 point mark. Ohio State is a juggernaut. Seeing Penn State's collapse, Ohio State lost their defensive coordinator to Penn State. I think the defense is better this year than they were last year. They are humming. And I don't know if there's anyone that can stop them until it's playoff time. They are so good. So good. And we've had people in our comments saying they're good. You're right. They're good. And they're proving it week in and week out, right?
How funny would it be, though, if they lost to Michigan?
I mean, that's not out of the conversation, but it doesn't derail any of their other goals. So
true.
It doesn't matter.
As we saw, it doesn't matter.
Yep. Didn't matter last year. So It's just another game on the schedule for them. That concludes our top 50 for week 8. We now go into our week 8 conference index where we take every team's S&D rating, we do an average score for each conference, and we rank them 1 through 9. At 9, we have the MAC. At 8, Conference USA. At 7, the Sun Belt. At 6, the Mountain West. At 5, the American. 4, the ACC. 3, the Big 12. 2, the Big 10. 1, the SEC. The number of S&D 50 teams in each conference. MAC has 0. Conference USA has 0. Sun Belt has 2. Mountain West 2. American 5. ACC 6. Big 12 11. Big 10 10. And SEC 13.
I think the story here is just the ACC not really putting teams into the top 50, that they are neck and neck with the American, if not in rating, in representation at least. Not neck and neck with the Big 12, not neck and neck with the Big 10, but
neck and neck with the American.
Neck and neck with the American. Outside of Georgia Tech and Miami, there's not really anything impressive going on in the ACC.
Is there 3 tiers? We've always talked about there being 3 tiers. SEC, Big 10, next tier 2, Big 12, ACC, tier 3, the G5s. I think it looks like the tier should be more like tier 1, SEC, Big 10, Big 12. Tier 2, ACC, American. Tier 3, Mountain West, Sun Belt, CUSA, and MAC.
Well, and the Mountain West and the Sun Belt are a step above CUSA and MAC.
I agree with you, Jacob. You're right. That's how it should be tiered, and it's not.
I think there's too much brand bias in there. Although I will say, for what it's worth, until they get poached by the SEC, the top of the ACC is consistently better than the top of the American. I do think the top heavy is a part of the factor there. Versus a conference like the Big 12, they're not necessarily as top heavy, but everyone in the Big 12 is going to give you fits every week.
And to be in tier 1, like Jacob's saying, it's almost like if you were to look at the sport through this conference index lens, you can see that the ACC is falling off and it's almost time to realign. Like the Big 12 did, they reload and look where they're at now. And for me, what I look at too is this SEC separation. Their average rating is 54.29. The Big 10 is 52.58. The Big 12, 51.96. And the ACC, 5,070. They are head and shoulders the best there is in the sport as a whole.
You talk about outliers. You know what the SEC doesn't have that everyone else has? Atrocious teams. That's a big part of the reason their average is so high is no one in the SEC is truly terrible. Without looking at the model, without looking at anything, who would you say the worst team in the SEC is this year?
Kentucky.
You know what? The model agrees with you. You know where they are? 71. That's just shy of the 50th percentile for the whole sport, and they're the worst team in the conference. Arkansas is right next to them is 70. Auburn is just outside the top 50 at 54, and everyone else is in the 50.
Incredible.
You know, even the Big 10, as vaunted as the top is, their bottom team right now, Wisconsin, getting just boat raced by everyone. In fact, the Big 10 has 4 teams lower rated than any SEC team right now.
This walks us right into our Week 8 conference quads.
This is my favorite thing that I've done so far with the model. And this is where we say, let's not just look at the conferences because we kind of understand how those tier out, but let's look at these in groups of 4. So if you're looking at this in front of you, you see our rankings of pods or quads of 4 teams from each conference and where those average ratings fall. So our number 1 is the SEC A quad. This week, that's Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Alabama, and joining them, LSU. Next up is Big 10A with Ohio State, Indiana, USC, and Illinois. Big 12A with Texas Tech, BYU, Cincinnati, and Utah. And then we actually have a flip-flop. Last week, we had the SEC B group rated higher than the ACC A. Well, the ACC A did well this week, came back in, and took over that 4 spot. So now the first 4 groups represent the tops of the Power 4 conferences. That ACC A group is Miami, Georgia Tech, Virginia. Then at number 5, you've got the SEC B group, the next 4 best teams in the SEC, Tennessee, Georgia, Missouri, and Vanderbilt, ahead of the American A group of Memphis, Tulane, Navy, and USF. Then you've got your Big 10B of Oregon, Washington, Michigan, and Nebraska. And then before you hit the Big 12B or the ACCB or any other A team, you actually have at number 8 the SEC C group. So this is the third best group of 4 teams in the SEC. Oklahoma, Mississippi State, Texas, and South Carolina. And we have them in at number 8, better than the Big 12's B group of Houston, Baylor, Kansas, and Arizona State. And better than number 10, same as last week, but with a new team in the mix, the Mountain West A group of UNLV, Boise State, San Diego State, and Hawaii. I love this view. I love seeing where teams, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see we've got little indicators for when a team jumps to a new tier. USC moved up, Michigan moved down, Utah moved up, Arizona State moved down. Oklahoma dropped down 2 tiers from the SEC A to the SEC C tier. But I love seeing it grouped like this, and the difference between the tiers of the conference really shows you how deep the SEC is.
This also shows you how accurate the model is, because if you look at these cluster of 4 teams, you say, oh yeah, those are the best 4 teams in that conference. And it also tells you where the conference championship race lies. And you can see how big these games and these matchups are ahead. Our Week 8 playoff picture.
Gotta love the playoffs this week. We've got, starting out in our 5v12 matchup, we've got Texas Tech hosting Group of 5 champion Memphis. As we talked about earlier, Memphis, the winner of that game would go and play number 4 Texas A&M in the Orange Bowl. Then in the 6-11 matchup, we've got a wonderful game between 6-seeded Alabama and 11-seeded Notre Dame. The winner of that game would go play Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl. In the 7-10 matchup here, for the first time having a second Big 12 team represented, we've got number 7 Miami, who would host number 10 BYU. Winner of that game would go play number 2 Indiana in the Cotton Bowl. Why are they in the Cotton Bowl? Because the Rose Bowl belongs in the top bracket, where number 8 Georgia Tech would host number 9 LSU in round 1, and the winner would go play Ohio State in that Rose Bowl game. This has 2 Big 10 teams, has 2 ACC teams. You've got 2 Big 12 teams. You've got a Group of 5 team in Notre Dame, and then 4 SEC teams. Again, the deepest conference, the most representation in the playoffs, with Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Alabama, and LSU. Next 3 teams out here, USC, the 3rd Big 10 team to seek a spot, would be bumped out by Memphis. Next 2 after them would be Tennessee and Cincinnati, another Big 12 team knocking on the door.
Miami BYU as a playoff matchup would be a throwback to the 80s.
Oh, man. Alabama Notre Dame would be a throwback to the 2010s.
Texas Tech, Texas A&M would be a throwback to the old Big 12. And there's just something special about Georgia Tech hosting LSU. It feels Clemson-y after they hosted Clemson this year.
That Georgia Tech team and Haynes King, they could do something really special in the playoffs this year.
The most favorable path here in this alignment of the playoff, to me, outside of Ohio State, would be Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
This brings us to a new segment, the S&D G5 Top 25, unveiling for the first time in Week 8.
We thought it would be a good idea to give you a glimpse behind the curtain of that race for the 12 spot in the playoffs. Starting out with number 1, Memphis, we see them have the 12 spot in the playoffs. They are the top rated G5 team. We've got some others that we've already talked about in the 50, Tulane, Navy, UNLV, and South Florida round out the top 5 of our G5 list. Then you've got Boise State, Southern Miss, James Madison, North Texas, and the first team here that's not in the 50, number 10, San Diego State. Then you move down into 11 through 25. These are all teams that are not in the S&D 50, but we got 11, UConn, 12, surging Kennesaw State, 13, the Rainbow Warriors of Hawaii. At 14, you got LA Tech on the decline. At 15, you got East Carolina, 16, Western Kentucky, 17, Washington State surging, 18, Troy, 19, App State. At 20, you've got Temple. At 21, Old Dominion. At 22, Miami, of Ohio, that is. 23, Western Michigan. 24, Fresno State. And 25, UTSA.
Boy, Fresno State would have been a top 10 team last week. And here they are, 24th in that race for the playoff bid. It's obvious to see the American dominating. They have 4 of the top 5 teams here. What I love about the playoffs is that you're guaranteed that one G5 spot. And I look to basically that top 10, and I'm like, any one of those teams could get that spot. It's exciting to know that any one of those teams we could see in the playoffs.
This brings us to our Week 8 games to watch. These are the games that the model has identified as the closest rating differential between two teams facing each other. This is our Tuesday and Wednesday slate of games to watch. Number 118 Arkansas State goes to number 122 South Alabama. The rating difference is 58.4. That game is Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. On Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, number 133 UTEP goes to number 132 Sam Houston. In the sicko game of the week, the rating differential is 41.7 in a duel to not go to the bottom of the FBS. At number 84, Delaware goes to number 96 Jacksonville State. That rating differential is 110.
I gotta love how the Blue Hens keep sneaking into this. We love them, but we love them because they keep showing up with competitive games, and they keep competing. First year in the league, first year in the FBS, and they're here to play.
CUSA weeknights will be delivering on Wednesday night with 2 games going on. I love that they're now playing on Wednesday night and that I can have that day to watch college football when I get home from work, no matter if it's 133 versus 132.
A competitive game is a competitive game no matter how lowly ranked you are. UTEP in back-to-back sicko-ish games of the week. I don't know if they were the lowest last week, but they were in there. So back-to-back weeks for UTEP in the games to watch. Our Saturday slate, starting at noon Eastern, number 25 Washington goes to number 26 Michigan. The rating differential is 52.5. At 3:30 Eastern on Saturday, number 131 Akron goes to number 124 Ball State. That rating differential is 117.6. Number 92 Texas State goes to number 86 Marshall. That rating differential is 32.5, also at 3:30. At 7:30 Eastern, number 12 USC goes to number 11 Notre Dame. The rating differential 42.2. And to close out the night, the Holy War, number 17 Utah goes to number 10 BYU. That rating differential 118.4.
We will see if Texas State can bounce back from that heartbreaking loss to Troy, and if Marshall can keep the momentum rolling after the big-time win against Old Dominion. The Sun Belt is just back and forth with these teams. I have no idea who's going to come out of that conference.
The MAC, as Spencer said, is the bottom feeders of the FBS, but it doesn't mean it's short of competitive games. Akron and Ball State, if you're feeling it, turn it on. It'll be worth your time. And I don't think Michigan fans or Washington fans would have guessed at the beginning of this year that that matchup would be competitive between the two schools, but a big game at Michigan this week.
Yeah.
USC Notre Dame.
My only concern is this constant jumping from coast to coast going to hurt USC again, just like it did against Illinois? The players literally looked fatigued against Illinois. Are we going to see the same against Notre Dame? Because they can't afford it. Maybe that later start time is going to be the difference maker there for USC. But if they play like they've been playing, Notre Dame better watch out.
Yeah, if USC plays like that top 5 team the model thinks they can be, Notre Dame might sustain a third and might be a gut punch for their playoff. Third loss, that would be a gut punch for their playoff hopes.
I love this rivalry because it just reminds me of that Reggie Bush game where they pushed him over the line as the game expired. I hope we get something just like it on NBC. There's something about those end zone lines. It's just pageantry on display. I love this rivalry.
You're bringing up core memories from my childhood, Andrew. I love
it's
it.
Good stuff. I mean, this is a rivalry you want to watch. And It's competitive, and I think if Lincoln Riley can pull this one off, actually both of them, this might be one of the biggest wins you can get for Marcus Freeman or Lincoln Riley. This is a huge one for both of their legacies about equally in their coaching careers at their respective schools. And it's two big questions. Can Notre Dame's offense score, and can USC's defense stop anyone? Hopefully, we'll find out an answer for one of these schools if anything's changed. The Holy War, 8 Eastern, Saturday. Provo, Utah will be rocking. This is a very anticipated matchup in the state of Utah. Kyle Whittingham's potential last Holy War, not guaranteed, but potential, one of his last ones. BYU, 2 back-to-back years of 6-0 starts. Utah on the rise, BYU on the rise. I believe the winner of this has a great chance to go get clobbered by Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game. But nonetheless, you'll get a shot potentially to play Texas Tech being the winner of this matchup.
That offensive quarterback matchup's really interesting to me. They got really similar stat lines so far through the year.
In the S&D 50, this is 10 versus 17. There is a lot to be had in terms of credit and where you can go with your year.
Rivalry game plus conference championship stakes plus top 10 stakes on the line. You can't get better than that.
That brings us to the end of the podcast. Spencer, thank you for being here.
A pleasure as always.
Jacob, thank you for being here.
I can't tell you how much I look forward to talking college football every week at this time slot.
It's a treat. We want to thank all of you for listening, liking, subscribing. We are floored at the response we've gotten from the college football community. Share this with your friends. We will continue to bring out these S&D rankings every Tuesday. We hope you have a great week, a safe week, and enjoy these amazing games of college football in Week 8.